From the moment Aaliyah Boston noticed something off in team meetings, it was clear DeWanna Bonner's presence wasn't what it used to be. Her leadership faded before her absence was official, and when she finally left mid-season, there was no warning, only unanswered messages and stunned silence. According to Lexie Hull, the betrayal didn't just hurt feelings. It exposed a calculated plan rooted in tampering by the Phoenix Mercury.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
Bonner had been recruited for months behind the scenes, while still occupying a critical role with the Fever. What was once framed as a veteran move now looked like desertion in disguise, and the damage was real. But out of that damage, something powerful grew. Indiana's young roster found resolve, not resentment. Hull's courage in telling the truth brought clarity, and with that came a sharpened sense of identity. This wasn't just about recovering from betrayal. It was about refusing to let it define them. The Fever emerged more focused, more unified, and more determined than ever to prove that character, not just talent, builds champions. Lexie Hull has had enough. In a new interview that's already setting the WNBA world on fire, she doesn't just throw subtle shade. She calls out DeWanna Bonner by name and lays bare what really happened behind the scenes of Bonner's abrupt exit from the Indiana Fever. It wasn't just messy. It was calculated. And for a team that was finally starting to find its rhythm, it was a gut punch. Let's be clear, Bonner didn't just leave. She disappeared. Mid-season. No explanation. No communication. Just gone. And while fans were left speculating and trying to piece together what happened, the truth, according to Hull, is way worse than anyone expected. Because this wasn't just bad timing, it was betrayal. From the outside, Bonner was supposed to be the experienced leader. The veteran brought in to guide a young, star-studded Fever roster that includes breakout names like Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, and of course, Hull herself. She had championship experience. She had credibility. She had the resume to help turn a developing team into a playoff contender. That's the role she sold to everyone. But behind the scenes, she was already halfway out the door. Hull's account reveals that Bonner's departure wasn't a spontaneous decision. It was a long-term plan, carefully orchestrated with the Phoenix Mercury. Tampering, pre-planned recruitment, strategic silence. According to Hull, the Mercury had their eyes on Bonner for a while, and what should have been a legal, transparent negotiation turned into something a lot more shady. This wasn't a trade. It was a calculated extraction. And for a team like the Fever, already navigating the intense spotlight brought on by Clark's arrival and the pressure of building around a new core, this kind of betrayal hits differently. Bonner didn't just exit quietly. She left a leadership vacuum. She left emotional damage. She left a locker room full of players questioning whether anything she said to them meant anything at all. Hull doesn't mince words. She describes Bonner's exit as abandonment. No warning, no leadership, no goodbye. Just silence. And when the players needed clarity most, what they got was confusion. It wasn't just about a missing presence on the court. It was the emotional whiplash of watching someone you trusted walk away with zero explanation. But what makes this even more serious is the bigger picture Hull exposed. Because this wasn't just about Bonner. This was about how the Phoenix Mercury allegedly operated behind the scenes, engaging in underhanded recruitment, exploiting Bonner's influence, and manipulating a situation that should have never gotten that far without league oversight. If true, it's a blatant case of tampering, and it undermines the integrity of the league. This kind of manipulation doesn't just impact one team. It sends a message across the league that trust is optional and loyalty is disposable. If a player like Bonner can use a rebuilding team as a temporary landing spot while quietly plotting a move with another franchise, then who's safe? And what kind of example does that set for rookies and younger players looking to learn from veterans? Lexie Hull's bravery in calling it out matters more than people realize. Because too often, these stories get swept under the rug. Teams keep it vague. Players say it's just business. But this wasn't just business. This was a deliberate move that fractured trust and broke down morale in one of the most exciting young rosters in the league. And still, somehow, the Indiana Fever didn't collapse. In fact, Hull says the betrayal became the fuel. Once the shock wore off and the confusion turned into focus, something shifted. Instead of falling apart, the Fever tightened their bond. Clark, Boston, Hull, and Kelsey Mitchell stepped up, not just on the court but in the locker room. Leadership didn't just shift, it evolved. They didn't wait for someone else to take control. They became the leadership the team was missing. Caitlin Clark, already under intense national scrutiny, doubled down on her role. She organized team meetings. She kept morale up. She showed up as more than just a scorer. She became the voice. And Aaliyah Boston? She brought the steadiness. The quiet confidence that holds a team together when everything feels like it's spinning out. And Hull, she didn't just keep quiet and move on. She told the truth. She put herself out there. And in doing so, she validated every teammate who felt blindsided by Bonner's move. Every rookie who wondered if loyalty even mattered in this league. Every fan who sensed something was off, but couldn't put it into words. Now, instead of being remembered as the team Bonner left behind, Indiana's becoming something else entirely. Resilient, unified, and more dangerous than ever. Their performance on the court picked up. Their chemistry improved. And the locker room, once defined by confusion and disappointment, now runs on clarity and purpose. They're not carrying bitterness. They're carrying focus. And the league should be taking notes. Because what Hull exposed goes beyond Indiana. It's a warning about what happens when the lines between professional moves and personal betrayal get blurred. When teams recruit in the shadows and players operate without transparency, it tears at the foundation of everything team sports are supposed to stand for. Integrity matters. Communication matters. And veteran leadership isn't just about scoring points or sharing experience. It's about showing up when it counts. Bonner didn't show up. She checked out. And in doing so, she reminded everyone that reputation doesn't mean much when your actions don't back it up. But the silver lining is undeniable. Because what could have torn this team apart has actually pushed them into a new era. They've seen the worst side of the business, and they've survived it. And now, they're thriving. Clark and Boston aren't just future faces of the league. They're already proving they can carry a team through chaos. Hull has cemented herself as a voice of honesty and strength. Mitchell continues to be the glue, bringing consistency and leadership in a time where trust has to be earned, not assumed. And most importantly, the Fever aren't waiting around for validation anymore. They know who they are. They know what they've been through. And they know that no veteran exit, no shady recruitment scheme, and no betrayal is going to stop what they're building. So where does that leave Phoenix? With a player who may have gotten what she wanted, but at what cost? Because when a player leaves a team like that, without transparency, without accountability, what she takes with her isn't just her talent. It's the respect. And if the Mercury really did engage in the kind of tampering Hull describes, then the WNBA has some serious questions to answer. About fairness, about regulation, about the kind of culture it wants to promote. Because this league is growing. Fast. And with that growth comes responsibility. These players aren't just athletes. They're leaders, mentors, role models. If the veterans can't lead with integrity, then it's on the younger generation to redefine what leadership actually looks like. And judging by how Indiana's responded, they're already doing that. They're holding each other accountable. They're rallying around honesty. They're proving that unity, transparency, and actual teamwork still matter in a league where ambition can sometimes cloud judgment. So if you're watching this play out and wondering where the Fever go from here, the answer is up. With or without Bonner, they're building something that's rooted in resilience, not reputation. And they're doing it with eyes wide open. Drop a comment with your take on Lexie Hull's interview. Do you think Bonner crossed the line? Should Phoenix be investigated for tampering? And who do you think will emerge as the next true leader of this team? Don't forget to like the video, share it with your basketball group chats, and subscribe for more deep dives into the drama behind the scoreboard. Because as long as the game is being played, we'll be right here breaking it all down, one meltdown at a time. The timing of it all makes it even more brutal. The Fever were finally starting to click. You had Caitlin Clark finding her rhythm, Aaliyah Boston commanding the paint like a seasoned pro, and Lexie Hull settling into her role with confidence and purpose. The team energy was high. There was momentum. There was hope. Then, boom, DeWanna Bonner exits without a word. Mid-season. No press conference. No thank you post. Not even a cryptic goodbye tweet. Just silence. It was as if she vanished into thin air, except she didn't vanish. She reappeared in Phoenix, smiling in a new jersey while the team she left behind was still reeling from the shock. And Lexie Hull, in her recent interview, said what everyone else was afraid to say. Bonner abandoned the team. That's the word Hull used. Not left, not transferred, not moved on. Abandoned. And abandonment, in a team sport like this, hits deep. Because you don't just lose a player, you lose trust. You lose the structure you've built. You lose the belief that everyone in that locker room is rowing in the same direction. Bonner wasn't just a contributor. She was supposed to be a leader. Someone the younger players looked up to. Someone who was brought in to stabilize a young roster and teach them what winning looks like. Instead, she taught them what disloyalty looks like. And if Hull's words weren't enough, she also pulled the curtain back on what was really happening behind the scenes. According to her, Bonner's exit was part of a long-term plan cooked up by the Phoenix Mercury. A calculated, under-the-table recruitment. A tampering situation that, if proven, could damage more than just one franchise's reputation. It could call into question the integrity of the league's recruitment system entirely. This wasn't about a veteran weighing her options. This was a player using her platform to manipulate a situation and walk out when it suited her, without any consideration for the team, the coaches, or the teammates she left in the dust. And the Mercury? They weren't innocent bystanders. Hull describes it as orchestrated, planned, quiet conversations, covert alignments, the kind of stuff that gets buried until someone like Lexie Hull dares to speak up. So now you've got a WNBA team, the Indiana Fever, left to pick up the emotional and competitive pieces after being used as a stepping stone in someone else's long game. And make no mistake, that's what it was. A stepping stone. Because when Bonner walked through those doors, she came with veteran credibility, championship experience, leadership promise. And when she walked out, she took none of that with her. Because as Hull made clear, none of it was ever really for Indiana. And yet, what could have broken this team ended up forging something stronger. Because the Fever didn't curl up and lick their wounds. They responded with grit. They pulled closer. They said, if she doesn't want to be here, then fine. We'll be here for each other. That's when the shift happened. Caitlin Clark didn't wait for someone else to take over. She stepped up, organized, spoke, led. Aaliyah Boston? She leaned into the role of emotional anchor. No drama, no ego, just consistent presence. Kelsey Mitchell? She locked in as the quiet veteran, proving you don't need to be flashy to be foundational. And Lexie Hull? She found her voice, not just in interviews, but on the court, in practices, in the way she held the team accountable, not with blame, but with truth. Her honesty about what went down didn't divide the team, it healed it. Because when the betrayal is that raw, the only way forward is through transparency. Hull's message to her teammates was clear. This happened. It sucked. It was unfair. But we're still here. And they're not going to define us. That kind of leadership, you don't teach that. You don't script it. It comes from being in the fire and choosing to stand anyway. And this is what makes the Fever's comeback so compelling. Because you have a young team, some of whom are playing their first professional season, being forced to deal with a scandal that most veterans haven't even experienced. And instead of falling apart, they leaned in. Their performance improved. The locker room got stronger. You could see it in the way they celebrated each other. The trust came back, but this time it was real. Earned, not handed out based on resumes or past championships. Because now they knew better. They learned that not everyone who wears the jersey is really there for the team. That leadership isn't about how long you've been in the league. It's about who you are when things get hard. And most importantly, they learned that betrayal isn't the end of the story. It can be the beginning of something stronger. Now let's talk about what this means for the league. Because Hull didn't just expose a personal betrayal. She exposed a systemic issue. If teams like the Mercury are engaging in long-term, secretive recruitment plans that actively interfere with other rosters mid-season, that's not just shady. That's dangerous. That undermines fair competition. It chips away at what keeps the league running with integrity. Tampering rules exist for a reason. And if those rules are being broken without consequence, what message does that send to other teams? To other players? That loyalty is optional? That you can slide into a player's DMs mid-season and start building your super team while another franchise is investing everything into them? That's not just a violation. It's a threat to the sport itself. Hull's willingness to share what happened is a bold move, but it's also necessary, because silence lets this kind of behavior continue. And if the league wants to grow, it has to confront the uncomfortable truths. Bonner's exit isn't just a footnote. It's a turning point. And look, Bonner might be living her best life in Phoenix now. But back in Indiana, there's a different kind of energy. It's not bitterness. It's clarity. They know what they're building now. They know what they don't want to become. And that gives them an edge. They've faced betrayal, survived it, moved past it, and now they're climbing together. And as Lexie Hull made clear, this isn't about revenge. It's about standards, accountability, the idea that if you put on the jersey, you show up. Fully. No secret plans. No silent exits. Just commitment. If Bonner didn't want to be part of that, that's her choice. But she doesn't get to walk away without the consequences of her choices being named. So here's where it all lands. Indiana didn't need Bonner to rise. If anything, they needed her to leave. Because once the illusion of leadership was gone, real leadership stepped up. And the Fever? They're not going anywhere. What Lexie Hull did wasn't just brave, it was necessary. Because sometimes the truth gets swept under the rug to protect egos, brands, or team culture. But what happens when silence becomes complicity? When keeping the peace allows bad behavior to fester? Hull clearly decided she wasn't going to be part of that silence. She said what everyone in that locker room had probably been feeling but didn't have the platform, or maybe the nerve, to say. DeWanna Bonner walked away, and she did it in a way that violated everything this team was trying to build. And look, Bonner's resume is stacked. She's one of the most experienced players in the league, a two-time champion, someone who's seen it all. But none of that matters if your leadership is conditional. None of that holds weight when your loyalty is performative. When your mentorship disappears the second another opportunity comes knocking, what's left? Lexie didn't drag Bonner's legacy through the mud. She exposed what happened in this situation. And context matters, because this wasn't a bad game or a tough locker room conversation. This was full-on abandonment in the middle of a critical season, with no communication and zero accountability. A disappearing act. A player who said all the right things, then ghosted the moment the Mercury whispered a better offer. And that whisper? It wasn't innocent. Hull made it crystal clear this was planned. Long before the departure, there were conversations happening. Behind closed doors. Behind Indiana's back. Bonner didn't just wake up and decide to leave. Phoenix was already laying the groundwork. That's what makes this so insidious. It's not just about Bonner's personal choice. It's about an entire team being used as leverage for another franchise's gain. So let's not downplay what Hull did by going public. She told the truth, knowing it could bring backlash. She laid bare an experience that could easily be spun as just business. And in doing so, she gave voice to every young player who's ever been let down by someone they were told to admire. The Fever didn't sign Bonner to babysit. They signed her to lead, to set the tone, to guide players like Clark and Boston, who were stepping in national pressure and media scrutiny most rookies never have to deal with. And for a while, it looked like she was doing just that. Until she wasn't. When she left, it didn't just shake the court rotations. It broke the emotional core of the team. And that's what Hull wants people to understand. This wasn't a standard exit. It was betrayal. A strategic, quiet, self-serving betrayal that shattered more than a game plan. It fractured the trust young players need to believe in the process. But here's the twist Bonner didn't account for. That same fracture is what solidified this team's identity. Because from that point forward, there were no illusions. No veteran safety net. No false leadership. Just a group of young women, bound by the decision to trust each other instead of a name on a resume. And that changed everything. Clark leaned into the leadership role people were begging her to take. Boston stepped into the spotlight, not just as a post presence, but as an emotional anchor. Mitchell gave them consistency. Hull gave them transparency. Together, they created a new team culture, one rooted in honesty and earned respect. They didn't let Bonner's exit define their season. They used it to define their standard. Now, every player on that roster knows what true leadership looks like because they've lived through what it doesn't. And if the league has any sense, it'll listen to what Hull is saying. Because this isn't just a locker room squabble. It's a reflection of what happens when player loyalty gets manipulated, when franchises bend the rules for their own gain, and when younger teams get left behind by a system that favors backdoor deals over transparency. The Fever are still standing, not in spite of the betrayal, but because of how they chose to respond to it. And that makes them more dangerous than ever. Their future? It's no longer tied to the name on the back of a jersey. It's tied to a shared understanding of what they won't allow again. So yeah, Lexie Hull put DeWanna Bonner in her place. Not with insults, not with drama, but with the one thing that cuts through all the noise, the truth. Comment below with your thoughts on Lexie's bold move. Was she right to speak out? Should the league step in? And do you think Indiana's young core has what it takes to finish what they started? Like this video if you're here for real talk. Share it with someone who needs to hear how not to be a team leader. And hit that subscribe button, because this isn't just sports gossip. This is the stuff that shapes a franchise. And trust, this story isn't over.